For those who may not know what the director of photography does, can you kind of fill us in?
So the DP, the director of photography, or the DP, or the cinematographer, it's all the same thing. What they do is they work with the director to help them visualize the movie. And effectively, what that means is there's 24 frames a second and in each movie. So all the photographs that you're seeing on the screen are the results of the director of photography's work. They work very closely with the director. They work very closely with the production designer, and they have a large team behind them of electricians and camera crew and grips to help realize everything. But they are translating the director's ideas into tactile, real images, and usually it's a very tight collaboration, and they are bringing an awful lot of their own tastes to the visual side of things.
Fantastic. It sounds like a really interesting job and a very important job.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the most important job on set. It is a very interesting job, and it can be very fun. It's kind of an interesting blend of art and craft and a little bit of science, bit of physics, and a lot of management, a lot of because you're marshaling a huge amount of the crew, to work towards one common goal.
Right. And I'm sure, there's some really big challenges like weather and, things like that. How do you deal with that?
I mean, it depends. It depends on the job. A lot of what you're doing is if you're trying to, create a very particular style, a very particular mood, is figuring out the best time of day to shoot a particular scene at. And so then you're working with the first assistant director to help schedule that. So maybe we find the location that we like, but the sun is going to be in the wrong place in the first half of the day. So I'm trying to encourage the first AD to schedule it towards the back end of the day so it'll have the right mood and the right quality. Or I'm trying to encourage the director to shoot towards a particular direction of a location so that the sun is in the right place. You're sort of managing weather that way. And then you're also bringing in a lot of equipment. You can bring in huge, what we call silks or textiles and cranes, which are 40 foot by 40 foot or 40 by 20. And you bring a whole bunch of those in and they sort of, you're like diffuse the sunlight. So you're hanging those, like hanging a roof, a temporary roof over an exterior set. There's lots of tricks you can do.
That sounds crazy,
Normal
but
day.
amazing. All right. So one of the most recent projects you worked on is Primate. And there is a lot of buzz around this film. So, can you kind of, there's a distinct look between like when he's, the good one and when he goes bad. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's at its very simplest level, the when Ben is good Ben, it's in a warmer, more family oriented, place. So you lean into, or I leaned into, warmer colors with the lighting, with the practicals, and it's a little brighter. And when he goes bad, everything gets a little colder. We start switching lights off, and you don't really doesn't feel like a nice, warm, friendly place anymore. It definitely feels more like the jungle that's outside, and it feels a little colder and a little more isolated. And maybe you play with the framing a little bit too, so you're kind of uncertain as to where Ben might pop up, or you can misdirect an audience that way, or direct their attention that way.
Wow. And, from what I understand, that Ben is a practical character.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had an incredible animatronic suit that Miguel, our performer, was in the whole time. And there's a bunch of different animatronic heads that we can use depending on the kinds of expressions that we needed him to make at any point. And he has a sort of evolving set of contact lenses as his disease gets worse and worse. Um, and yeah, he was there all the time. So it gave the actors, another performer to act against. It gave me something to light. The lighting of a character that is really, really important because when you're dealing with any kind of prosthetic makeup or animatronic creature, they're made of silicone or rubber, and those materials they're not alive the way skin is, so they don't react to lighting the same way. So you need to imbue it with a little bit of extra life through how you light it. And then you need to treat him like any other character. If that was Michael Myers, you'd be lighting him, for a certain sort of, psychological results. So you do the same with Ben. Or if it was one of our cast, you're lighting them, to the lighting should sort of enhance the psychological impacts that the movie has on the audience.
Right, right. What was your favorite scene that, after watching it, the completed project?
Um, I really like a lot of the stuff we did. There's a sequence which is in the trailer of Ben. He's just started to go bad, and he's confronting one of the characters. He's standing on a table. He's in a sort of a kitchen, living room, open plan area, and then eventually ends up running up to a door, a glass, reeded glass door, and you just see the impression of his face through the glass. And I really enjoyed doing that. I thought that was a lot of fun. We got to play with the space. The location that we had found for that part of the movie was, surrounded by glass windows, and you could be outside and look in, and it gave an incredible sort of feeling of, observing what was going on. And when you were inside looking out, you couldn't really see who was outside, so it felt threatening too. And we got to play with the space a lot, which is something I'm really keen on, making that feel like an extra character.
Fantastic. First, let me ask, how did you get into this job?
Well, funny enough, so when I was a kid, I was always interested in drawing and painting, and I, wanted to draw comics. That was my sort of way of learning visual storytelling. I would, copy the Marvel and DC comics that I was, reading, and I would draw my own little amateur comics. And when I was getting close to, leaving school and needing to decide what kind of university I was going to go to, I knew I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want a normal job. I didn't want to be a banker or be a lawyer or whatever. I wanted to do something in art. I was a huge movie fan, and I had stumbled across a magazine that had come out many years ago called Cinefex, which used to go through all of the models that ILM were building for Star Wars and the stuff that Rick Baker was doing for Greystoke and stuff like that. And it caught my eye, and it made sense to me because it was something that people were doing with their hands. And I could see someone drawing and painting and designing and building and sculpting. So I actually decided to do that. And I started in the industry as a makeup artist, wanting to make monsters. And part of me learning how to do that when I was in college was to learn black and white photography so that I'd understand what the lens and lighting was doing to someone's face or to something I was making. And I fell in love with photography, and I sort of sidestepped out of the makeup into becoming a camera assistant. And then I did this sort of old school approach of, you spend X number of years as a trainee and then another couple of years as an assistant and then move up the ladder that way and eventually became a DP. So this is a nice sort of full circle thing for me because it's a monster movie. It's something I've always wanted to do is work with monsters. And yeah, it was really cool to sort of be able to tie that all together.
Right. Well, if you had to describe this film in just 4 words, what would they be?
Mm. Violent, bloody carnage.
Those are always good words for a horror fan, That kind of makes our day.
Good.
Right. Okay, so if you had some advice for someone who wanted to come into the industry to do what you do, what would you tell them?
I would tell them it takes a little time. Don't expect for it to happen overnight, but that it's very possible. I'm from a small little town in a small little country that's very, very far away from Hollywood, and I, was able to do it. And if I can do it, everyone else can too. Um, I would say spend as much time as you can uh, you know, um, looking at paintings, absorbing as much culture as you can, from as many different countries as you can. And, there's a lot you can learn in books, there's a lot you can learn on YouTube, but try not to let yourself get stuck just in those worlds. Go out and all the life experience that you will get going to university, even if you're learning how to be a doctor, will also be applicable if you decide to be a cinematographer, later in life. It's all something you can draw from.
That's absolutely fantastic. And it always has always fascinated me the way that, just by shifting the light, that you can change the entire mood of a scene. And it's like you can make things more friendly and darker. And especially when it comes to the horror genre, that's a very, very important thing. Because if it's, we're not seeing it on screen, it's just flat. So, what you do is very important. And like I said, facing the weather, stuff that's out of control and figuring out how to overcome that is also fantastic for anybody. So it's a great thing. And I also have to ask, have you already found your next project?
Well, I was very busy last year and I worked on a TV show called The Gentleman, which will come out on Netflix, I'm going to say end of this year. And so I've taken some time off and I'm only now beginning to read scripts for whatever the next project will be. I needed a break. So yeah, I took quite a bit of time off.
Well, I can definitely understand. I mean, that's a lot of stress because the story is important and the character is important, but what you do, that's a heavy burden.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's an interesting mix between management and art and craft. And it's it's there's definitely days where I come back home and I'm on the phone to my partner because I almost never get to work near where I live. And I'm going, oh, it's a terrible day's work today. But it's also there's, more days where I go, actually, I'm incredibly lucky to have this job. And even if it was a hard day's work, I got to do some really cool stuff today. I got to work with some really interesting people or, shoot in a part of the world that I'd never normally get to visit. It is a very privileged position to be in. But you do need a break after every project as well.
I imagine. I can imagine being, away from home is a hard thing. And especially when you're frustrated and you're tired and, there's so many challenges. But either way, I'm glad you do what you do because you do it well.
Thank you very much.
Because I mean, the movies look fantastic. Atlanta was fantastic.
That's a great show.
So yeah, I'm not far from Atlanta. So it's one of those things you
Yeah.
have to watch if you're
Yeah.
in the area. So, but
It's a
yeah,
great
it's
show.
it's great. And
Great. Thank you very much.
you're very welcome. It's just honesty. But I am so glad that I got a chance to talk to you because that is something that's always been in the back of my mind is when you watch a film and you have to review it, you have to break it into all these little parts. And, it's a big part. So I always love, talking to people about their experiences and how they do what they do and what made them want to do what they do. Because, there's so many people out there that have that dream of doing something like this. And hopefully your advice will help.
Great. Hope so.
Well, I thank you so very much for taking the time to talk with me.
That's right. Thanks for having me. No problem. Anytime.
And I can't wait for everyone to see Primate so we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Watch Primate in theaters now and visit horrorfuel.com for news, reviews, interviews, and more.